Welcome to People with Purpose. I am your host, Sylvain Rochon. I'm a speaker, an author, a serial entrepreneur, and a business strategist. My purpose is to engineer a paradise on Earth using cutting-edge technology. I hope this show will give you excellent examples of individuals that chose to do great things in their personal and professional lives. Perhaps they will inspire you to follow in their footsteps. The show's format is very simple. I ask my guests 3 simple questions. What is your personal purpose? Why is it important to you? And how did you get started? Now let's hear from our guest.
Hello. I'd like to introduce you to Donald Jones. He is Vice President of Marketing at msw-ars Research. And he's a past VP Marketing and Communications at the University of Evansville. He's been in marketing for about 40 years and a reasonably new acquaintance of mine, and somebody that definitely has a story to tell. Now, Don, the first question for you is, what is your personal purpose in your life?
It sounds like the kind of interview question you get sometimes, but and that most people don't stop to think about every day. But it's a good one to stop and reflect on occasionally. I heard a presentation once by a fellow that did the whole discussion of going through graveyards and looking at tombstones and seeing dashes, and said, I just see 2 dates and a dash. Well, seems like the dash got kind of short end of the stick on that. There's quite a bit that happened in that. But for me, it's always been trying to accomplish something that either has not been done before by anyone, or certainly by anyone I know, that makes me feel good about myself. That it's not just for the organization's purpose, although that's critically important to me. I have a problem with people that just pursue their own agenda, and that has nothing to do with the organization. I've seen a lot of that. So they have to line up perfectly. But for me, it's always accomplishing something profound. And I think anyone can do that. I think it's possible in any profession. I latched on to marketing somewhat by accident. I was taking a general required course. I was majoring in accounting at the time. And I loved it. I mean, it was like playing chess for real. I mean, it was like war games without any blood. I mean, I said, this is what I want to do. But its purpose to me was always to do something extraordinary for people. And if you did that, then all the things that people want from marketing, the profits and everything else would flow, but only if you've done something real, that it was something that people really needed, was profound, and you did it in a way that was better than anybody else on the planet, then you were going to be successful. And so that lined up with what I wanted to do in my life. I've always been to a large degree about people, and that's typically what you'll hear in interviews. Oh, I'm a people person. Well, but, again, I think most people, they go through day to day and just kind of get through the day, and they might be thinking about events weeks or months ahead in their life, but they're really not trying to think about some sense of accomplishment overall. And I've always had that in mind. I find myself in meeting situations questioning something that we're doing and saying, what are we really trying to accomplish here? I heard a presentation by Edward Deming once, and he used to routinely say at the beginning of any engagement he would have with an organization, you may recall he's the quality expert that helped the Japanese develop their car industry into the power that it is in the world now. But he said, every organization needs to ask itself, what are you in the business of doing? What's your purpose for being? Why do you exist at all? And I've seen movies that are kind of interesting where, the R towns of the world and plays of that nature that at the end of it kind of beg the fundamental question, well, why were you even put on the planet? Mm-hmm. And you see people pursuing religious, philosophical beliefs in that regard to try and find an answer to that question. But I think each individual has to answer that question for themselves. And so what is your purpose for being here, and what do you want to accomplish? I've always felt a sense of urgency each day I get up that we're on this planet for a short time. I mean, we walk this earth for a short time. And some people get consumed with being remembered after they're gone. I'm less consumed about that as some sense of accomplishment why I'm here. I am consumed with that and this feeling that we're on this planet a short time.
Yeah.
And I think that from whatever perspective that you want to come from, most people don't want to face that reality each day. That's too morbid or too dark. For me, it's quite the contrary. For me, it's the opportunity. I'm not going to let this day pass until I do something that I feel very good about. It's extraordinary.
But you want to contribute something new, so into the world to innovate, I guess, and create some new opportunities, perhaps. And why is that? Why is that important to you? Why is that really fundamentally important?
It's a good question. I suppose some of that can come back to your upbringing, your parents making you feel a sense of duty or responsibility. I think at some point it's who you are. I don't know what the various journeys are that would take people to come to that realization. Again, I think most people don't want to face that realization. You see this manifest in different ways. So, for example, I was a consultant for IBM in their business consulting group for a while. And universally, we agreed the biggest challenge was change management. Getting people to embrace change is the most difficult thing that organizations can do. People fear it. They push back on it. They don't want to see it. And, I think that's related to that lack of sense of urgency for accomplishment. That instead the status quo protects and preserves what I feel comfortable with. Well, what you feel comfortable with is what you did the day before yesterday and today. And so at some point it's the so what question. At one point I was working for a company called ARS. And I was working with the Procter & Gamble R&D group. They develop new products, and they've got various groups that look at various time frame horizons. And for this particular presentation, they were trying to come up with a new measure of emotion in the marketplace and how to measure emotional response. And the industry was going through that time frame when it was soul searching as to what's important cognitive or emotional response. Marketing industry gets in that kind of mode from time to time where they sometimes you feel like you're counting the number of angels on the head of a pin, that it's the wrong question. Both are important. But nevertheless, I was presenting to them, and at the end of it, one of the leads in the room said, "So what?" And it kind of brought it all back to say, it's not just an intellectual argument. It's not just a conceptual thought, but how are we actually going to make this work and do something profound? And I think that's kind of the crux of it too, that if you're just doing the same thing every day, so what? If that, and some people, that's the pursuit of happiness for them. For me, it's not. I've had opportunities to be a COO of a company. I had the opportunity to be a CEO at one point of one company. And the thing that scared me most about most situations I was walking into is that there would be a lot of just running the ship kind of functions. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really want to just run the ship. I wanted to do something different. And who knows? Maybe it's short attention span. Maybe I get bored easy. I don't know. But that's me.
Yeah, it seems to me, if I can jump in here that you don't want just to work for the status quo.
No.
That's not you. You want to do something significant. But what does that significance mean? Like, what's the result of the significance of doing things that is not status quo?
Well, I think you're going to change the world in some way. You're certainly going to make the world better for a certain group of people, and you hope that's a broad group of people. But you're going to change the way things are done. So, for example, in the marketing industry right now, brand preference is commonly talked about. I could, every single RFP that comes out from every company looking for help routinely mentions, well, we've got to establish a certain level of brand preference within our current group while we're going after the next group. I could almost rubber stamp these out, it seems like. Well, a group that's in the process right now of coming up with standards for the marketing industry just named the brand preference metric that my name is on the patent. They name that as the industry standard.
Oh.
So every time that someone's talking about a routine measure of preference, I hold the standard for that. Well, in 100 years from now, will anybody remember that? Maybe not. Probably not. I don't care. I know that I've defined it. I know what it means. I know how to talk to people to help them improve for this thing that they're all trying to do. I also know how to beat the whole game. So that makes you feel good. And I know it's affecting a lot of people. It has affected a lot of people. When I first started working on the metric, that wasn't even a routine part of conversation. Mm-hmm. And now, 10 years or so, 11 years after the patent, it's routine. That's all. People wouldn't even question, well, why should we be talking about brand preference? It's just part of the routine conversation. It's accepted.
So that's this is an example, of course, of something that was done out of the box or outside of the boundaries.
Yes.
But that has affected an industry in such a way that has become a standard tool, a standard metric, and standard way of thinking.
That's right.
So the impact is outside of you and has impacted the whole industry in a positive way.
That's right. And, at that point in time, I was in a product development or innovation role for that company. But you don't have to be. I mean, you can innovate in whatever role you're in. And people try to make creativity and innovation very mysterious and that it's more art than science. Well, I won't deny the art. I appreciate the art. But there's a lot more science to it than people realize sometimes. I had the biggest argument I generated once was when I told a head creative for Disney that an anthropology professor had told me once that there are no new ideas, that everything's just building off another idea. Well, he thought that was outrageous. Mm-hmm. And so it made for an interesting conversation anyway. But the reality is that so much that's new you can build from what you already have. It's hard to imagine that we go from building huts to building shelters on the moon overnight. There were steps in between. And so in the case of brand preference, for example, it was derived from another measure. We took one measure that worked and we said, well, how could we change it somewhat, alter it somewhat, and apply it to this other situation, and does that make sense? And it did.
Excellent. And you talked about several times already about your desire to be nonconformist in a way, to think outside the box and these kind of things. So where did this kind of thinking start, like in your own personal path?
I think that one of the I've had a lot of people come to me for career counseling advice, and more recently when I worked at the university, of course, they were all students coming at me. And the questions would usually follow the vein of, should I go to work for a small company, a large company? What profession should I get into? All the standard questions you would imagine. And I would say to them, doesn't matter. Of course, they're all striving to be first in their class and everything else. Well, there's only going to be one of those, and we're going to need more than one person to run a company. So it better be more than that. So I'd go back and I'd tell them, hey, there's a scene in John Wayne's last movie that I just love. The Shootist, and it was done with Ron Howard was in it, and excellent movie. But it was John Wayne's last movie. And the character in the movie is dying of cancer. Well, at the time he shot it, John Wayne was dying of cancer, and he knew it.
Is that right? Okay.
And so the irony is just incredible for me. I'm not the biggest John Wayne fan, but I do admire that, his iconic role and all that. But in the movie, Ron Howard's character asked him for shooting training. Would you teach me how to shoot? And they go out to the backyard, and he says, pick a target, and it's his fork in a tree. And Ron Howard pulls out his 6-gun and lays down like 5 shots just perfectly. And John Wayne's character says, that's pretty good shooting. He pulls out his gun, and he lays out 5 shots just perfectly. And so Ron Howard says, Mr. Book, it was John Maynard Book was the character, said, how did you manage to kill so many men? My shooting's just as good as yours. He said, well, son, there's a difference. There wasn't somebody on the other side shooting back at you.
Mm-hmm.
He said, sometimes it's not a matter of necessarily being the absolute best at something. It's being willing. Most people, as I said, are afraid of risk. They don't want to take risk. They avoid change. And so many times in my career, I'd be in a room where we were given a challenge as an organization, and nobody in the room had ever done it before. And so they all kept their hands down, and I would raise my hand and say, well, I'll give it a try. And the next thing you know, I worked as a planning director for an advertising agency. I'll give you an example. And this was a number of years ago, but it was my first exposure to direct marketing. Firestone Company had wanted to talk to someone about preparing a list of everyone that had ever changed a truck tire in the country. This was 30 years ago, before the days of big databases and such. So I was going to have to build this thing from scratch. Well, nobody in the room when the assignment came in wanted to touch it. I said, well, I'll do it. And 2 weeks later, my boss said, Don, just think, 2 weeks ago, you had no clue of anything around direct marketing. Now you're an expert. I mean, you take it on by doing it. And I think one of the things that drives me too, I really like the series Now Discover Your Strengths. And one of my top 5 strengths is a learner. So I believe in lifelong learning. It's one of the reasons I like marketing so much. There's a lot of articles right now about how much marketing is changing and how people are becoming schizophrenic and wanting to get out because it's driving them crazy. Well, to me, that's sauce for the goose. I love it.
Yeah. Where do you think this kind of thinking comes from, though? I mean, you mentioned you cited some experience in the professional field, but you must have had some kind of ideas, maybe a mentor. Or
yeah, that's a
way to kind of get that inside you versus everybody else that kept their hands down. Like, so how did you get that bug?
Absolutely. That's a very, very good point. I have been very lucky, and some of it's not luck. I'd say some's opportunity, that I embrace mentors. I never go into any situation thinking I know the most in the room, even at this age. And oftentimes I probably do. But I don't go into that situation thinking that. I go in thinking I can learn something from everyone in that setting. And I've had really good leaders throughout my career. And some of them, I would say, weren't as successful in running the organizations or getting to where they, but I learned something from all of them. And I would even start with my father. I mean, he believed that this whole planet was just a school and that we're in training for something that's beyond this. That was his philosophy of life. And I've seen that. We are sensory beings. We're always in touch with something, and we're constantly learning. And if you get into learning theory, back to the building block idea that it's an A and then a B and then a C, you learn in steps and you pile onto it. I've always believed that. And so I think the other thing is the positive reinforcement you get when you succeed at taking on something that nobody else wanted to try, and pushing yourself. I know that as I worked with Procter & Gamble, there was a CEO there that was just excellent for a number of years, but he would hold meetings every Saturday morning with his entire staff, and when it came to his personnel, they would go over star individuals that he saw rising in the Procter & Gamble organization, and his routine line was stretch them. And I thought, that's perfect. Never be content. There's a person with talent, and I believe everyone has talent. I really do. You've got to find it and figure out how you put them in situations where you can stretch them, because they're going to be really happy individuals when they succeed, and you can help them succeed. And I think the mentors I've always had wanted to see me succeed. And so that's a very long roundabout way of saying, I think it's about being willing more than anything else. Willing to take on new things, bigger challenges. Most people are not. Most people are afraid and will back away from them. And yet, when you do them, I ran sports. I was in sports in high school, and track was my best event. And I was a sprinter for our school for 4 years. So even as a freshman, I was a sprinter. So I was, in those days, fairly fast runner. I wouldn't claim that now. But I set out to break the school record my junior year in a couple of different events. And so I trained all summer, and people in my neighborhood would joke, they'd drive by and stop, "Are you training for the Olympics?" Because most kids in high school at that time didn't run a lot unless they had to. No, I'm just getting ready. First event of the year, I broke the record by a full second in one event that had held up for 15 years.
Wow.
I can't describe the feeling. It's the sense of accomplishment that I took on something that nobody felt like they could do or wouldn't be done, and I did it. And I did it in a way that was profound. It makes you feel like once you've done it once, you can do it every time. And it's an adrenaline rush.
A little bit like getting into the habit of achieving something that's never been done before, and then it becomes easy.
Yes, and I would say it does get easier. Actually, it does.
Well, Don, I'm hoping through this series that just with any one of my guests, because they're all great people, but in your case, people can see you as a mentor and perhaps walk the same footsteps and perhaps see you as a mentor. Why not? And then maybe they'll do the same thing you did, like take that first challenge, that first deep dive, right? Shake off the fear.
Yeah.
Get used to it, and then they can be some people just like yourself that change things, change industries, change the world, improve on subjects, and that's my hope for the series.
Well, one thing I might add, if I can quickly add it, and it's a deep concept, so it may be difficult to add it quickly, but most of what I've talked to you about is individual based. One of the things I learned very strongly, and this was from my healthcare time, I've gone through several different career periods, the power of teams. I really believe that a team working together, that trust each other, that respect each other, can do anything, and I've seen it. I really do believe that. It's more difficult to do. I think you don't see it that often. I mean, certainly most organizations I've been in, every one of them wants to claim they're a team, but I've really seen very few that really are. And to have that level of trust that it takes, and then to have that shared vision or objective of what they want to accomplish, I've never seen one fail. I never have. And so that excites me a lot. And so I don't want to overemphasize the individual effort in this, because if you give me a strong team working together, they can always beat individual efforts from my perspective. And so I think your question about mentoring gets at that to a degree, but it's a little bit of a bigger question than that. But yes, it's certainly never been my effort to try and go out of my way to be mentors for people on purpose. I mean, I don't think about it every day, but I'm always delighted to do it. I worked 2 different universities as an adjunct professor from time to time, off and on. And in fact, I'm going to be teaching one this semester, I think, because I kind of enjoy that feedback and asking the basic questions again and hearing that freshness. And I always learn something from them in every one I go to. It keeps me honest and fresh, I guess is the way to put it.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot, Don, for your time. And hey, keep doing what you're doing. It works.
I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed the interview. If you did, please subscribe to the channel, comment, like, and share. Please join me also on Clubify, a social app allowing us to share ideas and where you can participate in some of my projects. The link is in the section below. Also, if you wish to recommend someone great I should interview, please let me know. And as always, follow your passion. See you next week.